Hello, Year 3, and welcome to your final science lesson on light. Well done if you got through every single science lesson this half term. You should be super proud of yourself. So looking at today's wall, today we are learning about to find patterns in the way that shadows change. First of all, though, we're going to recap what we already know about shadows from last week. So start off by reading these three children's ideas about shadows, and you need to think about which child you agree with. Our shadows are reflections from the sun, says child number one. The stronger the source of light, the bigger a shadow will be, says child number two. I think shadows are made by something blocking the light, says child number three. Think about which child do you agree with. If you think number three, you would be right, because we know that shadows are made when something blocks the light. It doesn't matter how strong the source of light is, because the shadow will be the same because it's just the area where there's no light. And our shadows are reflections from the sun, partly true, but we know that any source of light can result in a shadow if you block it. So a light bulb, if you block a light bulb, you'll make a shadow behind you. A torch, you can make a shadow using. So it's not always the sun, is it? It's of every source of light you can block and produce a shadow. So how is a shadow made? Let's recap. Shadows are created when an opaque object blocks light. The light cannot travel around or through the object, so a darker patch of less light is created behind the object. Remember, shadows are not reflections. If we look at this example down here, the light from a torch hits the object and it is reflected off in all directions, which allows us to see it. And then behind it, there is a shadow because the light couldn't pass through. So the light travels, it bounces back, and behind there is a shadow. Now, have a think. We're going to experiment with this later, but how do shadows change? Think about how and when shadows change size. Pause the video and think, how do shadows change? Okay. We're going to talk about that later. So to start off, we have a bit of a situation we're going to read through, and that will begin to help us understand how shadows can change. So we have a bit of a story. It was a lovely sunny Saturday. Having done all her homework and eaten her lunch, Eva decided to sit out and enjoy the sunshine. Having put on SPF 50 sun cream, Eva put her deck chair in the sunniest part of the garden, away from the shadows of the oak trees. Eva had a relaxing time lying on her deck chair and reading her book. Gradually, she nodded off to sleep. Suddenly, she woke up feeling a bit chilly. When Eva had fallen asleep, she was in bright sunshine. Now she was in the shadow of the oak trees. Eva was confused. She hadn't moved, so why now was she in the shadow? Hmm. So Eva didn't move, but the shadows did. Pause the videos and think, why did the shadows move? Okay. So you might have thought about the sun. So the sun was the source of light which was um, shining down on Eva, wasn't it? And it was up here in the sky. So when the sun was up in the sky above Eva, the light was coming down. But as we know, it looks like the sun moves throughout the day, doesn't it? However, you do have to remember the sun doesn't move. The sun stays in one place and we spin in circles, which makes it look like the sun is moving. Okay, but just remember the sun does not move. So as we spin around, the sun moves through the sky and then is then blocked by the trees, isn't it? So that's one way how shadows change. The sun, which was the source of light, changed position, which then changed the location of the shadow. So straight away, there's one way that shadows can change. If you move the source of light, then the shadow will change direction. It's one way that we can change shadows, and you'll see that later on today. Thinking about now, where is the sun in these pictures? So this is thinking about how shadows are created. the direction of the source of light. So for this shadow here, what direction is the light coming from? Oh, well done if you said it was this sun, because the shadow, the light would be coming in through here. The man's standing there, so the light is blocked. If it was this one up here, the shadow would be here. If it was this one here, the shadow would be there. And if it was this one here, the shadow would be there. What about this card? Look at the four suns, look at the shadow. Where is the light coming from? Well done if you said the sun above, because the light's coming down. It's hitting the cart from above, so the shadow is underneath the cart. What about the skateboard? Look at the shadow. Look at the suns. Well done if you said this sun. So the light comes down, hits the skateboard, is blocked by the skateboard, which then makes a shadow behind it. And lastly, what about this one? This one. So we've got a shadow here on this side of the fence. Where is the light coming from? Well done if you said this sun. So the light's coming down from a diagonal, hitting the fence, and then making a shadow behind it. So what you're going to do now is do a bit of investigating about shadows. Using a torch, remember that all iPhones and most modern phones have a torch built into them, don't they? So you can use a phone with a torch on. I want you to go around your house, choose an object or a few objects, and experiment. Losing my voice. Experiment with how you can change the shadow. So I'll give you some ideas. What happens when you get closer to the object with your torch? What happens when you get further away? What happens when you move the object? What happens when you move the light source? Okay. So do some experimenting. Spend about 5 to 10 minutes just having a play with a torch, with an object, moving it around. What do you notice about the shadow? How can you make the shadows bigger? And how can you make the shadows smaller? And how can you change the position or the location of the shadow? Pause the video and go do some experimenting now. Okay. Should have paused by now? Lovely. So let's have a chat about what you need to do as your activity. So by now, you should have thought about what makes a shadow bigger and smaller. You would have found out that the closer the object becomes to the light source, the bigger the shadow behind it. Why do you think that is? Well, if you thought it was because it blocks more light, then you would be right. The closer that the object gets to the light source, the more light is blocked. But when you take the object further away, the shadow, will get smaller because less light is being blocked. How did you change the location of a shadow? Well, what you probably would have done was move the object around or move the light source around. So keep the object in one place, but move the light source around it in a circle, and you would have seen the shadow go around it, because the shadow will always be the opposite side of the light, won't it? So what you need to do now in your books is get today's date and today's Walt written down, and then write down these two questions and have a go at answering them for me in your best words, using 2 to 3 sentences for each question. Once you've done that, guys, you are finished for today and finished with our topic on light. So a massive well done. Those of you who have tuned in for every single one of our lessons, when we come back in school, I'm going to be using you guys as scientists to teach those people who might have missed a couple of them everything that you've learned. So you might want to do a bit of a recap as well of what you've learned in this topic. But until we're back in school, guys, and until next half term, I will see you next time. Bye, everybody. Oh, I can't find the record button. Bye, guys.